That sandwich took away everything a 9-year-old child could possibly have, but it gave that boy a future worth $47 million. My name is Asha Delaney. That year, I was 9 years old, a black child living in Sandtown, Winchester, the poorest neighborhood in Baltimore. Through the iron fence of Lincoln Elementary School, I saw a black boy so thin he looked like nothing but skin stretched over bones. He was starving. My family had nothing. My parents worked 3 different jobs between them and still barely made rent. But I gave that boy my lunch every day. For 6 months. No one asked me to do it. No one thanked me. I just did it. The day the boy left, Malik, that was his name, Malik Ardent, made a crazy promise. I'll marry you when I'm rich. I laughed. Then I tore the red ribbon from my hair in half, tied one piece around his wrist, and kept the other half for myself. 22 years passed like smoke. Malik became a CEO. He spent 5 years buying houses, hiring private investigators, turning all of Baltimore upside down to find me. He found nothing. Tonight, he will walk into a community meeting in Upton. I will be there too, still wearing my half of the ribbon inside an old locket. Neither of us knows that in just a few seconds, 22 years of separation will collapse into nothing. But before I tell you about that night, the night Malik dropped to his knees in front of 50 people and called my name, I need to tell you about those 6 months. 6 months in which a 9-year-old child decided that the life of a stranger mattered more than her own hunger. Because if you don't understand that, you won't understand why Malik searched for me like a man searching for air to breathe. And you won't understand why, 22 years later, I still remember every line of that boy's face. That November, I had just turned 9 2 months earlier. I lived with my grandmother, Corinne, in a rented 3-bedroom apartment in Sandtown, Winchester. The paint peeled off the walls. The heater was broken. When winter came, we wore 3 layers of clothes even inside the house. My parents worked 16 hours a day. My father worked security, then drove Uber at night. My mother cleaned hotel rooms during the day and washed dishes at a restaurant at night. I hardly ever saw them. Every morning was the same. My grandmother woke me up, cooked a thin bowl of oatmeal, then walked me to school. Lunch was the school meal, a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a carton of milk. It was the only meal of the day that made me feel full. In the evening, we ate rice and beans, or boiled potatoes. Or nothing at all. At those times, Grandma always said, "I'm not hungry, you eat." We weren't living, we were just surviving. But Grandma Corinne taught me one thing. She said, "My little Asha, we don't have much, but we always share what we have. Always." I didn't understand that until I saw Malik. It was recess, November winter. The Baltimore wind blew up from Inner Harbor, freezing, cutting through skin like a knife. I was jumping rope with Jasmine and Keisha when I suddenly stopped. On the other side of the iron fence was a boy. Curled up on the sidewalk, I had seen him for 3 days already, always sitting there silent, doing nothing. Just watching us eat. But today was different. He couldn't sit upright anymore. He was slumped against the brick wall, head hanging, purple lips. Matted hair, torn clothes, no shoes. And then I saw his eyes. Not the eyes of a 10-year-old child, but the eyes of someone who was waiting to die. Jasmine tugged on my arm. "Asha, don't look anymore. He's scary." "He's not scary," I said. "He's hungry. That's not our problem." I looked down at the lunchbox in my hand. A peanut butter sandwich, an apple, a carton of milk, my only meal until night. Grandma had nothing extra to give me. But in my head, I heard her voice, "Always share what you have." I walked toward the fence. "Asha, where are you going?" Jasmine shouted. I didn't hear her. My heart was pounding. I was scared. But I couldn't turn back. Up close, the boy looked even worse than I had thought. Cracked, dry skin, a bruise on his cheek, bleeding lips. And the smell, urine, sweat, garbage. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to flinch. "Hi," I said very softly. "My name is Asha. You look hungry." The boy looked up. His eyes glistened. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I pushed my lunchbox through the gap in the fence. "Take it, eat." His thin fingers, shaking like an old man's, snatched the sandwich. He stuffed it into his mouth, 4 bites, swallowed, no chewing. Tears streamed down his face. I stood there and watched him finish everything. The apple, the milk, even the cookie crumbs in the paper bag. When he drank the last drop of milk, he looked at me. His lips trembled. "Thank you?" His voice was hoarse, shattered like glass. "What's your name?" "Malik." Are you okay, Malik?" He shook his head. "No." My heart felt like someone was squeezing it tight. The school bell rang. I had to go inside, but I didn't want to leave him. "Tomorrow I'll bring you lunch," I said. "I promise." Malik's eyes widened. "Really?" "I promise." I ran back toward the classroom, looking back 3 times. Malik was still sitting there holding the empty milk carton, watching me. That afternoon, I couldn't focus in class. My stomach growled with hunger, but I had only one thought. Tomorrow, I need to bring double the food. That night, I came home. Grandma Corinne was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of rice and red beans. I opened the fridge. Empty. A carton of eggs, a bottle of hot sauce, a bag of stale bread. "Grandma," I said, "tomorrow I need to bring 2 lunches." She stopped stirring and turned to look at me. Her eyes already knew. "Why, Asha?" I told her. About Malik, about his eyes, about the way he ate, like he hadn't eaten in a week. My voice shook. "I can't let him die, Grandma." Grandma Corinne said nothing. She turned back to the fridge, took out the egg carton. Only 2 eggs left. She cracked both into the pan. "What are you doing?" I panicked. "What will we eat?" "I'm not hungry." "But Grandma, Asha." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I'm old, you're young, and that boy is hungrier than we are." She looked at me steadily. "Tomorrow, you'll take 2 lunches. 1 for you, 1 for him, I'll manage." I hugged her. She wasn't tall, but in her arms I felt safe. "Thank you, Grandma. You're doing the right thing," she said. "Your grandfather used to do the same." Then she told me. Long ago, when she and Grandpa were young, they were hungry. A stranger gave her a loaf of bread. That loaf, she said, saved 3 generations. Tears spilled down my face. "You're the best person in the world." She smiled. "No, baby, I just do what I know." That night, she cleaned houses for a neighbor, earned $5, bought bread, peanut butter, and 2 apples. The next morning, she packed 2 lunches. "Take them, Asha," she said. "You're not just giving him food, you're giving him hope." I didn't understand then, but I would. The second day was harder than the first. The first day was impulse. I saw and I gave. But the second day was a choice. I knew that if I fed Malik, I would be hungry. I knew my grandmother was sacrificing. I knew I was trading something away. But when recess came, I still walked to the fence. Malik was still there. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Asha, I brought your lunch." He opened the paper bag, 2 sandwiches, 2 apples, 2 cartons of milk. "Why?" he asked. "Why are you helping me?" I remembered Grandma's words. "Because you deserve to live," I said, "and because no one else is helping you." Malik cried like a child. "Where do you live?" I asked. "Nowhere. My mom died. Foster care. They gave up on me. They can't do that. They said I was too difficult." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not difficult. I'm just sad." "You're not alone anymore," I said. "I'll come every day. You promise?" I promise. And from that day on, it became routine. By the third week, my friends started drifting away. "Asha, why do you keep feeding him?" Jasmine asked. "Because he's hungry. But we want to play with you. I have to feed him first." Keisha shrugged. "Fine, let Asha go." "She likes playing with the homeless boy more than us." That hurt, but not enough to stop me. At lunch, I sat alone, watching Malik eat his sandwich on the other side of the fence. He ate more slowly now. Chewed carefully, as if trying to make each bite last. "Why don't you sit with your friends?" he asked. "I am sitting with my friend." "You're losing friends because of me." "It's okay. You matter more." "Why?" "Because you're Malik. You're my friend." We didn't say anything else, just sat there, two children, separated by an iron fence. But the fence wasn't there anymore. In the fourth week, Miss Patterson caught me. I was handing the sandwich through the fence when she stopped. "Asha Delaney, what are you doing?" I was scared, but I didn't lie. "I'm feeding my friend." She looked at Malik. For a long time. "Who is this boy?" "Malik. He's homeless, he's hungry." She was silent. Then she knelt down to my eye level. "Asha," she said softly, "I didn't see anything. Do you understand?" "Yes?" "I only saw you eating lunch. Alone." I understood. She was protecting me. Before leaving, she looked at Malik again. Her eyes were red. "That boy looks like my son," she said, "before I lost him." The next day, there was a bag of snacks in my cubby, no name. I brought all of it to Malik. And that was only the first 4 weeks. There were 2 more months of winter ahead. There were bigger prices I haven't told you about yet. There were things Malik and I couldn't imagine. You'll see what happens when the kindness of a child begins to threaten a system, and when the Baltimore cold forces me to make the most painful decision of my life. Don't leave. In the next part, nothing will be simple anymore. December arrived. Baltimore got cold in its own way, not the dry, burning cold of the West, but a damp cold that slips into every crack of your bones and then clings to you like a curse. The temperature dropped to 5 degrees. Wind blasted up from the Patapsco River, slicing into skin like a razor blade. I wore a coat, wrapped a scarf, put on gloves, pulled on a knit hat, and still I trembled. And Malik had none of that. On the first day of December, I ran to the fence. Malik was sitting in the same place, curled into a small ball. His lips were purple. His skin was cracked until it bled. No coat, just a torn t-shirt and paper-thin jeans. Bare feet pressed against the cold concrete. "Malik!" I shouted, nearly panicking. "Where are your shoes?" His voice trembled, broken. They took them." "Who took them?" "Older boys." Malik lowered his head. They were cold too." I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have time to fall apart. "Wait here, just a second." I spun around and ran into the school nurse's office. No one was there. I opened the cabinet, took 2 wool scarves, 2 pairs of socks, a spare coat, too small for me but probably the right size for Malik. I stuffed everything into my backpack and bolted back outside. But after only a few steps, I froze. I saw my own coat, the only coat I had. My parents bought it for me last year. It was a little tight now, but it was still the only thing warm enough to fight Baltimore winter. I looked at it like it was my last piece of property. Then I took it off. December cold slammed straight into my skin. I started shaking immediately. But I still walked to the fence. "Put it on." I pushed the coat through the iron gap. Malik shook his head right away. "No, you'll be cold." "I have another coat." Malik looked up at me. His eyes were painfully clear. "That's not true," he rasped. "You only have this one." I held my breath. I knew he was right, but I still had to do it. "Then I'll be fine," I lied, forcing my voice steady. "My house has a heater." Our heater was broken, but at least I had walls, a roof. Malik had none. "Asha, put it on!" I almost yelled, my voice cracking with fear. "Please!" Malik's hands shook as he put the coat on. It fit him perfectly, as if it had been born for him. Just one warm layer of cloth, and he looked like someone being pulled back from the edge. He wrapped his arms around himself and started to cry. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." And I stood there in a thin sweater, shaking in the cold wind and specks of snow. But when I saw Malik warming up, I felt it was worth it. I didn't tell Grandma Corinne. I didn't tell anyone. I just said my coat got lost at school. For 2 months, I endured recess after recess in that sweater, fingers turning purple. Lips splitting. Grandma Corinne watched me. She knew something was wrong, but we had no money to buy a new coat, and she didn't force me to talk, as if she was waiting for me to open up on my own when I had the courage. A week later, I started getting sick. Fever, cough, sore throat. My throat burned like swallowing rocks. Grandma begged me to stay home. But I couldn't. If I didn't go, Malik wouldn't eat, so I went to school anyway, every day, sick and shaking. Still walking to the fence, handing over sandwiches, watching Malik eat. "You're sick," Malik said, his eyes darkening. "Because of me. Not because of you." I tried to act normal. "It's just a cold." Malik stared at me longer, like he was fitting pieces together. "You gave me your coat." His voice caught. "Now you're sick, right?" I didn't answer. "Asha, please." Malik gripped the fence. "Take the coat back. I don't want you to die because of me." I swallowed, my throat burning. "I'm not going to die." Then I looked straight at him. "But if you don't have a coat, you will die." I drew in a deep breath, like I was forcing myself to be hard. "So be quiet and keep the coat on." Malik broke down crying, but he kept wearing it. That night, Grandma Corinne stopped me the moment I stepped into the apartment. No roundabout questions, no scolding. She just looked straight at me and said, "Tell me." And I told her everything. About the coat. About the cold. About Malik. She didn't yell. She didn't blame me. She didn't call me foolish. She just hugged me tight. For a long time. "You have your grandfather's heart," she whispered, "and I'm so proud of you." Then she stood, opened the closet, and took out my grandfather's old coat. It was too big for me, but thick and warm. "Wear this." She draped it over my shoulders. "And don't give it to anyone else." I nodded. But deep inside, I already knew another truth. If Malik needed it, I would still give. I used to think giving was just an act, but then I realized every time I walked to that fence, it wasn't about sandwiches anymore. It became an appointment, a habit, an invisible thread. If I didn't show up that day, Malik would wait. If I was late, Malik would scan around in panic. If I coughed, Malik would look at me like he was about to lose me. And me, I started being afraid of something else, not afraid of hunger. Not afraid of cold, but afraid of the day I walked out, and Malik wasn't there anymore. And then, in the 5th week of winter, that fear became real. I ran to the fence. Malik was lying on the ground, not moving, eyes closed, skin pale. His breathing fast and shallow, like every breath was a battle. "Malik!" I screamed, lunging forward, gripping the iron bars and shaking them hard. "Wake up!" No response. "Help! Somebody!" "Help me!" Miss Patterson ran outside. The moment she saw Malik, her face went white. "Pneumonia," she said, voice shaking. "He needs a doctor." "Then call an ambulance," I screamed, tears spilling over. Miss Patterson looked at me. Her eyes were full of pain, like she was standing in front of a choice no one should ever have to make. "Sweetheart, if I call, they'll take him." She swallowed hard. "And then he'll disappear into the system. Do you understand?" I understood, but in that moment, it didn't matter. "He's dying!" I screamed. Do something! Ms. Patterson looked at Malik, then looked at me, then finally pulled out her phone. But she didn't call 911. She called a different number. Corinne, this is Patterson, your granddaughter and the boy. I need you to come to the school, now. 20 minutes later, Grandma Corinne arrived. She brought medicine, soup, blankets. She didn't ask, she didn't blame, she didn't hesitate. She climbed over the fence, despite her age, then knelt beside Malik and put a hand on his forehead. High fever, lung infection, she said firmly. He needs antibiotics. Do you have them? I asked, my voice shaking. Grandma was silent for 1 second. Then she pulled a bottle from her bag. The label had my grandfather's name. Your grandfather's, she said softly. He needs it. But this boy needs it more. But Grandpa, he'll be okay. She didn't look at me. I'll manage. She gave Malik the medicine, wrapped him in blankets, fed him soup, 1 small spoonful at a time. 2 weeks. Every day after school, Grandma came, caring for Malik through the fence. Ms. Patterson helped too, bringing more medicine, bringing more food, and telling no one. And me? Every recess, I sat there. I slipped my hand through the gap in the fence and held Malik's hand. I talked to him, told stories, sang, anything so he wouldn't feel alone. Once, in a fever, Malik mumbled nonsense. Mom, I'm sorry, I'll be good. I broke into sobs. It's not your fault, Malik. You've been so good already. My voice caught. You're the best person I know. Malik gasped for breath, lips trembling. I just want to be loved. I don't know where that sentence came from, but I said it as if I didn't, he would disappear. I love you. Then I said it again, clearer, stronger, like I was nailing it into the world. I love you, Malik. Please don't die, please. Malik opened his eyes, looked at me. Asha, I'm here. I tightened my grip on his hand. I'm not going anywhere. Malik squeezed my hand. And for the first time in 2 weeks, he smiled. From that day, Malik started getting better, slowly, but surely. 3 weeks later, my grandfather died, a lung infection. There were no antibiotics left. Because Grandma had given them all to Malik, I didn't know until it was too late. When Grandma told me, I collapsed. It's my fault, I sobbed. If I hadn't given Malik the medicine, Grandpa would still be alive. Grandma Corinne grabbed my shoulders hard. Her eyes were so stern I had no choice but to meet them. Listen to me, Asha. Her voice was slow, final. Your grandfather was old. He lived enough. That boy is young. He has a whole life ahead of him. Grandma swallowed, but she didn't let tears defeat her. Your grandfather wanted you to save Malik. He told me, give it to the boy. Don't let our granddaughter carry this pain. But Grandma, there is no but. She shook her head. That was my decision and your grandfather's, and I would do it again, if I had to. I hugged her. We cried together. But not from regret, from love. The kind of love that sacrifices, the kind of love bigger than yourself. At the funeral, I looked at Grandpa's coffin. And I swore, in silence, I won't let this sacrifice be meaningless. I promise. April arrived. 6 months had passed. Malik was much healthier, still thin but no longer dying. His skin had more color. His eyes were brighter. His hair had been cut. Grandma Corinne cut it through the fence. He was cleaner. Miss Patterson let him use the school's hose. I started to believe that. Maybe everything would be okay. Then the news came. Foster care found a family for Malik on the other side of Baltimore. Malik had to go. Miss Patterson told me after school, Asha, tomorrow is the last day you'll see Malik. My heart stopped. No, that can't be. They're taking him on Friday, she said. You have 1 day left. I ran home, crying like I couldn't breathe. Grandma Corinne held me. "You knew this day would come, baby, but I'm not ready. No one is ready when they have to say goodbye to someone they love." That night, Grandma and I worked like two people preparing for a migration. We cooked everything we could cook: sandwiches, cookies, fruit, candy. We stuffed it into a big bag, enough food for Malik for a week. "So he knows someone remembers him," Grandma said. The next morning, I carried that bag to school. It was so heavy it pulled my shoulders sideways, but I didn't care. When recess came, I ran to the fence. Malik was already waiting. He looked at me, and he knew. "Today is the last day, isn't it?" Malik asked softly. I nodded. I couldn't speak. "I know." Malik tried to smile. "Foster care told me. I'll have a new home, a new family. That's a good thing." My voice shook. "Yeah." Malik nodded, but his eyes were red. "But I'll miss you. I'll miss you too." I pushed the bag of food through the gap in the fence. "For you, there's a lot." Malik opened it, saw everything. His eyes filled. "Asha, you?" "Me and Grandma cooked last night," I said fast, like I was afraid I'd break. "So you'll have enough to eat." Malik started to cry. "You've given me too much already." "Not enough." I pulled the red ribbon from my hair, my favorite ribbon. Dad bought it for my birthday last year. I tore it in half. I tied one half around Malik's wrist. "Keep this," I said, my voice choking. "Remember me. Remember that someone believes in you." Malik stared at the ribbon, then at me. "Asha." His voice shook. "I promise. One day I'll be rich, and I'll come back. I'll marry you." I laughed through tears. "We're only 10. "I don't care." Malik shook his head. "I promise." I held the other half of the ribbon in my hand. "If you promise, I'll keep this, and I'll wait." "You'll wait for me?" "Forever." We reached through the fence and touched hands, gripped so hard it hurt. The school bell rang. Recess was over, but neither of us moved. Finally, Miss Patterson stepped closer. "Asha, you have to go inside now." I didn't look at her. I only looked at Malik. "I love you. I love you too." We let go. I turned away. Each step felt like I was pulling my heart out of my chest. I looked back 3 times. 3 times Malik waved. The 4th time, he was gone. I ran into the bathroom, cried until there were no tears left. I clenched my half of the ribbon in my fist and swore through sobs, "I'll remember you, Malik, forever." And 22 years later, I still kept that promise. My name is Asha Delaney, 31 years old. I'm a social worker at the Upton Community Center in Baltimore. Every morning, I wake up in a tiny studio apartment in Druid Hill. The old bed squeaks every time I turn over. The refrigerator buzzes all night long, like a sigh that never ends. The faucet drips, one steady drop at a time. My rent is $850 a month, almost half my paycheck, but I don't complain, because I still remember what hunger looks like. In the morning, I make cheap coffee and drink it fast. I put on jeans and a simple shirt. I don't wear much makeup, not because I don't want to, but because I don't have time, and I don't have money. I stand in front of the mirror and see a tired woman, dark circles under my eyes. Shoulders slightly slumped from days that drag on, but my eyes still hold something hard, determined, like there's a vow living in them. And right at my neck is an old locket. I wear it every day, always. Inside is half of a faded red ribbon. 22 years. The fabric is almost rotten, almost falling apart, but I have never taken it out, not even once. Grandma Corinne died when I was 23. Before she passed, she held my hand and said, "Asha, never forget that boy. You gave him life, and one day you will see him again." I didn't believe it. 22 years, Malik had vanished from the world. No Facebook. No Instagram, not a trace. Maybe he died. Maybe he forgot me. Maybe the promise we made at 10 was just a childish promise, light as wind. But I kept the ribbon, because a small part of me still hoped. I work with children the system abandons. Every day I meet different Maliks, 16, 17-year-olds about to age out of foster care. They're terrified, lonely, no money. No skills, nowhere to go. I try. Housing, jobs. Scholarships, anything that can pull them back from the edge. But the system is too big, and me, I'm just one person. One afternoon, Kendrick Vale walked into my office. 16 years old, black, and those eyes made my heart pinch. He looked like Malik so much I had to hold my breath. Eyes of someone who lost hope a long time ago. "Sister Asha," Kendrick said, his voice hoarse like he'd swallowed too much sorrow. "Next month they're kicking me out of the foster home. I don't have anywhere to go." My chest tightened like it was being crushed. "Sit down, Kendrick," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We'll find a way." Kendrick gave a bitter little laugh. "There is no way, sis." "I know. That's how the system is. They raise you until you're 18 and then throw you out on the street, like trash." "It's not like that," I shot back immediately, as if saying it firmly enough could make it true. But Kendrick looked me straight in the eye. "It is like that." His voice dropped lower. "Do you know how many kids in this system end up homeless? How many die? How many go to prison?" I knew those numbers, the numbers that keep you awake at night. 20% become homeless immediately. 25% go to prison within 2 years. 50% are unemployed. Horrific numbers. "I don't want to be a statistic," Kendrick whispered. "I just want a chance." I took his hand and squeezed, like I could push belief into him through my palm. "There will be a way," I said. "You trust me." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. Because I'd said that to 10 children this month alone, and I'd only saved 3. That night, I went home. The room was dark, silent like a box. I didn't turn on the light. I sat on the bed, took the locket off my neck, opened it. Half of the red ribbon lay inside, thin and faded, like a memory about to dissolve. I looked at it, then whispered, as if I were speaking to a real person somewhere out there. "Malik, if you're still out there, if you can hear me, I need help. There are too many kids, too few resources. I can't save them all, and I feel like I'm failing." Of course, there was no answer. Only silence. I closed the locket, wiped my tears, and prepared for tomorrow, because no matter how tired I am, I'm not allowed to give up. Never. If I give up, I betray everything Grandma Corinne taught me, and I betray the thing Malik believed about me when he was 10. So I keep going. Every day. Exhausted, drained, but still going. 31. Single. I don't date. Friends ask, "Why don't you find someone?" I usually answer, "No time." But the truth is more complicated than that. I tried. I dated a few people, but I always felt something was off. Not because they were bad, because I always felt like I was standing in the wrong place in my own life. 2 years ago, I dated Marcus. He was a software engineer. Kind. Stable. Wealthy. We were together for 3 months. Then Marcus proposed. I said no. "Why?" he asked. "We're good together." "You're a good man," I said. "But I don't love you." Marcus froze. "Then who do you love?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Or maybe I did, but I was afraid to admit it. After Marcus, I stopped dating. I threw myself into work. But there are nights when I'm alone, the room dark, the refrigerator buzzing, and I feel hollow, like something has been carved out of me. I touch the locket. And I wonder, where is Malik? Does he remember me? Or am I just a blurred childhood memory, something he left behind long ago? Once I opened my laptop and searched Google. Malik Ardent Baltimore. No results. I tried Facebook. Instagram, LinkedIn, nothing. Maybe he changed his name. Maybe he's dead. Maybe he never wanted to be found. I closed the laptop, cried, and promised myself I wouldn't search again. Because every time I search, I only hurt myself more. The truth is, I think what hurts the most isn't that Malik disappeared. It's that I've lived 22 years with a question that has no answer. If I hadn't walked to that fence that day, would Malik still be alive? And every time I look at Kendrick, or any child about to be dumped onto the street by the system, that question comes back, sharp as a blade. Am I looking at Malik one more time and I'm powerless again? Every night I tell myself, tomorrow will be different. But then morning comes and I see the numbers, the files, the kids, and a system that never slows down. Until this week, until a community meeting that seemed ordinary and a name that knocked my heartbeat off rhythm. This Thursday, 7 p.m., Reverend Simone Banks is hosting a community meeting at the Upton Community Center. Topic: a developer wants to build housing in our neighborhood. His name is Malik Ardent. His company, Ardent and Associates. I heard the name and my heart jumped faster by one beat, but I immediately calmed myself down. Malik is a common name. It couldn't possibly be him. Reverend Banks told me, Asha, you're a social worker. You know what the residents need. Ask the hard questions. Don't let him fool us. I nodded. I won't. I prepared a list of questions about affordable housing, about displacement, about the empty promises developers before him had poured into our neighborhood, then walked away. Thursday came. I wore jeans, a shirt, old flats, nothing special, just me, a normal woman with a notebook and a suspicion that never fully goes out. I walked into the community center at 6:45. The room was crowded. 50 people, families, elders, young people, everyone carrying the same fear, the future of the neighborhood. Reverend Banks greeted me. Asha, thank you for coming. Sit in front. You'll ask first. I sat down, took out my notepad. Read my questions again, waited. Exactly 7 o'clock. The door opened. A man walked in. Tall, expensive suit, black, mid-30s, haircut clean. An expensive watch, shoes polished to a shine. He walked in like a CEO. Confident, powerful, wealthy. People began whispering, that's him, the millionaire. Maybe he's here to destroy our neighborhood. I looked at him. And something felt familiar, a vague sensation, like an old smell in a room you once lived in a long time ago. He sat in the back row. His eyes swept across the room, then stopped on me. We looked at each other. 1 second, 2 seconds. In that moment, I felt a vibration, like an invisible thread had just been pulled tight. But then he looked away, as if forcing himself to look somewhere else. Reverend Banks stood. Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're meeting Malik Ardent, CEO of Ardent and Associates. He wants to build housing in our neighborhood, but we've heard promises before. So, we will ask, and he will answer. People clapped, but not in support. It was skepticism. Malik Ardent stood up, stepped forward, opened his laptop. Projected slides. Hello. His voice was low, deep, and warm. I'm Malik Ardent. I grew up not far from here. I know what empty promises look like. The whole room went quiet for a beat. I propose building affordable housing, he continued, not luxury apartments. 60% of the units will be reserved for current residents at the current rental price. A murmur rose in surprise. The community center will be completely renovated. Malik clicked to the next slide. New heating system, new roof, expanded services, all funded by my company. Next slide. We will create job training programs, hire local people, invest in the people of this neighborhood. Malik paused, looked around the room. I know you don't trust me yet, he said slowly, but I'm not here to get richer. I'm here to give back. My hand went up. Reverend Banks pointed to me. Asha Delaney, social worker. Go ahead. I stood, gripping my notebook, looking straight at Malik Ardent. Mr. Ardent, I said, enunciating every word, affordable means something very different to a millionaire than it does to someone on minimum wage. What is the exact price? Malik looked at me. And I swear, there was something in his eyes, a fragile shock, like he'd just heard a sound only he could recognize. But then he answered, voice controlled. The units will be priced based on the area's median income. We're working with the housing authority. A good answer. But I didn't stop. What about current businesses? Will they be pushed out? We're offering rent protections and relocation support. Good. I was still suspicious. How do we know you'll keep your promises? Developers before you always gentrify our neighborhood. Malik turned fully toward me, his eyes locked onto mine. I grew up in this neighborhood, he said, slow but steady. I've seen promises broken. I don't want to become that person. But, I started to continue. Sorry. Malik cut in, but not rudely, just as if something else, suddenly more important, had slammed straight into him. May I ask your name? I frowned. Asha Delaney. Malik went still. The silence stretched longer than normal. Then he said, his voice trembling like it couldn't hold itself together anymore. Asha. Delaney? Yes. I felt my heart pounding. Why? Malik didn't answer right away. He looked at me like he was looking at a ghost, something he'd searched for so long he stopped believing it could be real. Then he asked, voice hoarse, Did you go to Lincoln Elementary about 22 years ago? My heart stopped. Yes, I blurted. How do you know? Malik didn't answer. He just kept staring at me. Then he asked again, each word dropping like it was hitting the floor. Do you remember feeding a boy through a fence? A black boy, 10 years old, every day for 6 months? The entire room disappeared. Time froze. I couldn't breathe. How do you know that? My voice broke. Malik stepped down from the stage, walked straight toward me. His eyes were red. Because... His voice sounded like it was about to split. I was that boy. I shook my head. No, that's impossible. Asha. His voice shattered. I'm Malik. No? I kept my promise, Malik said fast, as if afraid that if he slowed down for even 1 second, I would vanish. I said I'd come back when I was rich, and I did. My hand flew to the locket. I opened it. Inside, half of the red ribbon. Malik saw it. He pulled out a key, and tied to it was the other half of the red ribbon. We lifted them, placed them side by side, a perfect match. The same ribbon, torn in half 22 years ago. Malik? I whispered, like I didn't dare believe the sound of my own voice. Hi, Asha. I don't remember how I fell. I only know my knees went soft. Malik caught me in time, held me, hugged me. And 22 years vanished. I cried. Malik cried too. 50 people stared at us, but I didn't care. I thought you were dead, I sobbed. I searched for you, Malik said, his voice catching. 5 years, without stopping. Why couldn't you find me? You tried. Malik shook his head. But Delaney is common. And you weren't in Sandtown anymore. We laughed through tears. You're really here. You're really here. Reverend Banks stood, still stunned. Everyone, let's take a 15-minute break. People slowly stood up and filed out, whispering, shocked, not yet understanding what had just happened. But Malik and I didn't move. We only held on to each other, because after 22 years, Finally, we were reunited. Reverend Simone Banks led us into a small office behind the community center, closed the door, and left us there. Just the two of us. Malik and I sat across from each other. Neither of us spoke right away. We just stared. Like if we blinked, this miracle would disappear. I still can't believe it, I finally managed to breathe out. My voice was still shaking. 22 years, Malik. 22 years. Malik repeated it, his eyes never leaving mine. Every day, I thought about you. Every single day. Without thinking, I touched the locket at my neck. I never took this off. Malik lifted his keyring. Half of the old red ribbon was tied tightly to it. Neither did I. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't scary. It felt like a pause, so our hearts could catch up to reality. Malik leaned forward. Tell me. Tell me everything. I want to know how your life went. I took a deep breath. After you left, I tried to find you. When I was little, I didn't even know how. But when I grew up, I tried everything. Google, Facebook. I couldn't find you. Malik nodded slightly. Because I changed my name. I froze. Changed your name? My birth name was Malik Johnson. His voice got smaller, like he was touching something painful. But I hated that name. It reminded me of the people who abandoned me. So when I turned 18, I changed it to Ardent. Ardent, I repeated, like I was tasting a new word in my mouth. Why Ardent? Because of what it means. Malik looked straight at me. Passionate, devoted, burning. That's what I carried about the promise I made to you. Tears rose again. You really meant it? When we were 10? Yes. Malik said it with certainty. Asha, you saved my life. You gave me hope when I had nothing. How could I forget? I bit my lip, trying to stay steady. I thought it was just a kid's promise. Malik shook his head. No, for me it was the promise of a child who knew that. You were the only reason he was still alive. I started to cry. Malik dragged his chair closer and took my hand, the same way the 10-year-old boy had once held it through the gap in the fence. Now it's my turn, Malik whispered. Do you want to hear my story? I nodded. After I left Baltimore, they moved me to another foster family. They weren't perfect, but they gave me food, clothes, a place to sleep. I stayed with them until I turned 18. Malik paused. But no one loved me the way you loved me. I squeezed his hand. Then I aged out. Malik's voice dropped. No money, no job, no home. I lived in my car for 6 months. I blurted, Malik. Every night I sat in that car looking out at the city, looking at tall buildings, people passing by, and I only thought one thing. Where are you, Asha? Are you still alive? Did you forget me? I shook my head over and over. No, I never forgot. Neither did I. Malik touched the ribbon. Every night I touched it and reminded myself, Asha believes in you. You have to become somebody. Find her. Keep your promise. He kept talking like he was describing a long climb with no shortcuts, doing any work he could, construction, yard work, delivering pizza, sometimes 3 jobs at once, living in his car, eating instant noodles, saving every dollar. After 2 years, I got into community college, Malik said. I studied business and real estate. I knew if I wanted to lift my head up, I had to understand land. And you really kept going? I asked, still unable to believe it. Malik nodded. I graduated with high grades, got a scholarship into university, finished my bachelor's, then an MBA. I stared at him like he was impossible. You did all of that alone? Because of you, Malik answered. Because of the promise. I swallowed hard. So now, how rich are you? Malik hesitated for a second, then said plainly, net worth, $47 million. My mouth fell open. 47 million? Yeah. Malik exhaled like the number didn't matter anymore. I do real estate. I buy old houses, renovate them, sell them, started small, then grew. Now I own about 20 buildings in Baltimore. I almost didn't know how to react. Malik looked at me and his eyes softened. But I'm not happy, he said quietly. Money, status, but every night I go back to my penthouse overlooking Inner Harbor and all I feel is emptiness, cold, and alone. You don't date? I tried. Malik shook his head. But people see money. They see the CEO label. They don't see me. Not the way you saw me. My throat tightened. Me too. I tried dating, but it always felt wrong. Malik looked at me longer. Really? I nodded. I carried you in my heart for 22 years. I didn't know how anyone else could fit in. Something in the air shifted. We weren't two kids anymore. We were adults, but the feeling between us was still intact. In that moment, I realized the most terrifying thing about this reunion. Not that Malik was rich, not that he still remembered me, but that everything suddenly became real. A promise that once seemed childish had been strong enough to pull two lives back to the same point. And if Malik had really gone that far just to find me, then the next question was simple, yet dangerous. What did he find me for? I swallowed, returning to what I still needed to understand. Tell me about the search. Malik took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I had everything, except you. And without you, none of it meant anything. What did you do? I hired the 3 best private investigators in Baltimore, Malik said. I gave them everything I knew. Your name, Lincoln Elementary, Sandtown, Winchester, the Red Ribbon. I held my breath. And then? Nothing. Malik's voice turned bitter. Asha Delaney is too common. Your family left Sandtown after 2008 without leaving an address. The leads dried up. I went quiet, my throat tightening. But I didn't give up, Malik continued. I bought properties around Lincoln Elementary, 12 buildings within a 2-mile radius. I stared. Why would you do that? Because I believed if you were still in Baltimore, you'd be somewhere near here, helping someone. Malik looked at me like that was the most obvious truth in the world. I created reasons to keep showing up. Waiting, hoping. I couldn't speak. At most community meetings, I usually send a representative, Malik went on. But tonight, I had a strange feeling. I don't know why. I just felt like I had to come, and you came. And I found you, Malik said, his voice catching. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked softly, like I was afraid the question could make everything collapse. Were you scared that I'd changed? That I wouldn't remember? Every day, Malik answered immediately. But I still searched. Because whether you remember or not, I owe you. I owe you this life. You don't owe me anything. I shook my head. You saved my life, Asha. You've paid it back already, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, by becoming a good man, by helping this neighborhood. Malik looked at me, warmth growing in his eyes. You think so? I know so. Malik smiled, a real smile, for the first time since we walked into this room. You have no idea how happy you just made me. Then tell me. For 22 years, I've felt like part of me was missing, Malik said slowly. But now, sitting here with you, I feel whole for the first time since I was 10. I didn't answer. I just squeezed his hand tighter. Then Malik looked at me again, his tone more serious. Now it's your turn. I want to know your life. So I told him. About Grandma Corinne, about becoming a social worker. About the kids I tried to save and couldn't. About the exhaustion. About the loneliness. About how I often felt like I was failing. I feel like I'm failing, I admitted. There are too many kids, too few resources. Every day I meet another Malik, and I can't save them all. Malik listened, then said very slowly, very firmly, Asha, you can't save everyone, but you saved me. And then I'll save someone else. And then they'll save someone else. Kindness spreads that way. I bit my lip, but they need more than hope. They need homes, jobs, money. Then let me help, Malik said immediately. I looked up. Help how? I want to set up a program for kids aging out of foster care, Malik said, his voice clear, as if he'd prepared it for a long time. Transitional housing, scholarships, job training, mental health counseling. Everything. I still hadn't even caught my breath when Malik continued, Budget, $10 million for the first year. My mouth fell open. 10 million? Yeah. Malik nodded. And I want you to run it. I let out a shocked laugh. You're joking. Not at all. Malik was serious. You understand those kids. You have their trust. You're the most qualified person. I shook my head. But I don't have a nonprofit management degree. I've never run anything that big. You have something better. Malik looked straight into me. You lived it. You know where the barriers are and what real support is. I still felt dizzy. This is too big. You don't have to answer right now. Malik softened his voice. Just think. And Asha? This program is separate from us. No matter where things between you and me go, it still exists. You'll have a contract, legal protections. It won't depend on our relationship. I stared at him. You've been thinking about this a long time, haven't you? 5 years, Malik said. I knew if I found you, I wanted to do this. But even if I didn't find you, I still would have done it. Because you taught me kindness matters, that people deserve a second chance. Tears slipped down my face. You don't understand what that means to me. So will you do it? Malik asked softly. I took a deep breath. I need time. To think. Take all the time you need. I was quiet for a moment, then said, Can you promise me one thing? Anything. No matter how things between us end, you'll still help those kids. Don't let them live the way you did. Lost, terrified, alone. Malik took both my hands and squeezed hard. I promise. Okay, I nodded. I'll think about it. Malik smiled. That's enough. There was a knock at the door. Reverend Banks cracked it open. People are waiting. Are you two okay? Malik and I looked at each other. Then we both laughed, like two people being pulled out of a long dream. We're okay, I said. Good. Reverend Banks nodded. Because the community wants answers. Malik stood. I stood too. And like it was the most natural thing in the world, we walked out, hand in hand. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward us, and for the first time in 22 years, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. 1 week after the meeting in Upton, Malik invited me to his office in downtown Baltimore. The high-rise looked straight out over Inner Harbor, floor-to-ceiling glass, revolving doors, security in suits. I stood at the base of the building, looked down at my jeans and my old button-up shirt, and felt so out of place it was almost funny. But then I walked in anyway, 23rd floor. Malik's office was wide, modern, cold bright. Success was everywhere, from the furniture, the lighting, to the way everyone moved with that look of, we're very busy because we're important. His assistant, Chantal, gave a professional smile. Ms. Delaney, he's waiting. Please go right in. I knocked. Come in. Malik's voice carried through. Malik was standing by the window, looking out at the glittering water. When he turned and saw me, his face lit up immediately. Not the way a CEO lights up for a guest, but the way a man lights up when he's finally looking at the person he's been wanting to see. Asha, you came. I said I would. Malik smiled. Sit down. I have something I want to show you. I sat. Malik opened his laptop and projected onto the large screen the Red Ribbon Initiative. My throat tightened. You named it after the ribbon you gave me. Malik nodded. Yeah. He moved through the slides slowly, clearly, as if he was trying not to overwhelm me. A program for young people aging out of foster care, ages 16 to 25, transitional housing in buildings he owned, a scholarship fund, job training, mental health counseling, life skills, legal support. Then he stopped on one line. Budget $10 million for the first year. Goal, 100 young people. Expand to 500 within 3 years. I stared at the number like it didn't belong to my life. Malik continued. I've partnered with 12 companies in Baltimore. They'll provide internships, jobs, and mentors. He looked at me. But the program needs a director, someone who understands these kids and has their trust. Malik pulled out a folder and placed it in front of me. A formal offer, Executive Director, the Red Ribbon Initiative. Salary, $120,000 a year, full benefits staff. 10 people, full operational authority. I went still. Malik, this is a real job, Malik said, calm but firm. Not a helping out for fun kind of thing. You'll work insanely hard. Reports, presentations, budget management, and Asha, this is separate from us. No matter what happens personally, the program still exists. You'll have a contract, legal protection. I still hadn't caught up. You're giving me real control? Completely. Malik nodded. This is your program, your vision. I'll fund it and support the business operations. What if we disagree? Malik smiled. Then you win. I read carefully. I asked non-stop questions. Malik answered straight. No dodging. Finally, I looked up. I have conditions. Say them. I want to hire people from the very community we serve. The team has to include people who've lived through the system. Agreed. I want an advisory board made up of former foster youth with real influence, not just for show. Absolutely. And I want to still work 1 day a week at Upton Community Center with my old cases, so I don't forget why I'm doing this. Malik nodded immediately. Put it in the contract. I drew in a breath like I'd just walked out of a room with no oxygen. Then, yes. I'll do it. Let's save as many kids as possible. Malik's smile was radiant. Thank you. We shook hands. Professional. Then Malik hugged me. Personal. We're going to change lives, Malik said. I whispered back, we already have each other's. Over the next 3 weeks, Malik and I met 4 times. At first it was for work, but strangely, every meeting ran longer than planned. 1 hour became 3. The plan dissolved into everyday stories, laughter, and silences that didn't feel awkward. Malik noticed things people usually didn't notice, how I kept checking my phone because I was afraid of emergencies, how I ate fast like I was afraid of wasting time, how the heels of my flats were worn down. He wanted to fix everything with money, but I always refused. And instead of pushing, Malik changed his approach. Every time we met, he brought the exact coffee I drank. You remember? I asked. You said it once, Malik replied. I remember everything you say. Then he brought sandwiches, every kind. I laughed. You really like sandwiches that much? Malik looked at me, his voice going smaller. Because it's the best thing I've ever had in my life. I understood immediately. The smile died in my throat. Once I complained that the center needed a new heating system, $30,000. We didn't have it. Malik only said, let me see. 3 days later, a brand new system was installed. I stopped him. How much did you pay? Malik stayed calm. I found someone who owed me a favor. I looked straight at him. You paid. Malik shrugged. Does it matter? The kids have heat now. I didn't say anything else. But I started watching him more closely. Not to doubt him, but because I was afraid I would soften. By the fourth meeting, I realized this was no longer just a program. Malik wasn't only helping with money. He showed up. He stayed. He looked at every kid the way he once looked at himself. And the scariest part was, every time he did something good, I saw more clearly the question I'd been trying to avoid. Was Malik saving the kids, or was he trying to save the childhood he'd lost? And if so, where did I belong in this story? That same day, Kendrick Vale knocked on the meeting room door. "Ms. Asha, they kicked me out. I don't have anywhere to go." My chest felt heavier. I tried to keep my voice professional, but the helplessness slipped through. "I'm trying, Kendrick, but the system always fails." Malik looked at Kendrick, and I saw him, seeing himself. Kendrick left. I buried my face in my hands. "This happens every week," I rasped. "I can't save them all." Malik spoke very slowly. "What if there were a real program for kids aging out?" I let out a bitter laugh. "That would be amazing, but who funds it?" Malik only answered, "Let me make a few calls." A week later, news came. An anonymous donor pledged $500,000 to the scholarship fund. I called Malik immediately. "Was that you?" "You don't know what you're talking about." "Malik," a pause. Then he asked lightly, "Does it help the kids?" "Yes." "Then what does it matter?" My chest tightened. He was doing exactly what I once did, only now he had an entire world in his hands. Malik started showing up at the community center more often, not for meetings, just present. "I was in the area," Malik said, even though his office was 30 minutes away. My coworkers whispered, "That man loves you." I brushed it off. "We're just friends." They laughed. "Friends don't look at each other like that." One evening, when I walked out to my car, Baltimore's winter wind slapped my face. I shivered. Malik draped his coat over my shoulders. "Malik, you'll be cold." "I'll be fine." I went completely still. Those words were the exact ones I'd said to him 22 years ago. Now Malik was saying them back to me. Same tone, same rhythm, like he'd kept them in his pocket all these years. My heart cracked open. 3 days later, Malik called. "I want to take you to dinner. Not work, just us." I hesitated. "Malik, please, just one dinner." "As friends." I took a deep breath. "Okay. Friday, 7. Malik arrived at 7 on the dot, a simple suit. In his hand, a bouquet of daisies. "I remember you said you like simple things," Malik said, a little awkward, like someone on a first date. He took me to an upscale restaurant downtown. I'd never stepped into a place that beautiful in my life. "Malik, this place, it's too much." "Please." He looked at me. "Let me have one night where I get to do something good for you." And strangely, I let myself relax. We talked like we'd known each other for a long time, even though on paper we'd only found each other again a few weeks ago. Books, movies, forgotten dreams, fears we kept hidden. After dinner, Malik asked, "Can I show you something?" "What?" "A surprise." Trust me, we drove to Inner Harbor, late, quiet, winter lights glittering. Malik led me to a specific bench. "I need to tell you this here." He opened his phone and showed me a photo, an 18-year-old, clearly homeless, sitting on that exact bench. I looked closer. My stomach dropped. "That's you?" "Yeah." Malik nodded. "After I aged out of foster care, I had nothing. I lived in my car for 6 months, and every night I sat here." He zoomed in. On his wrist, half of the red ribbon. "Every night I touched it," Malik said, his voice breaking, and I reminded myself, "Asha believes in you. You have to do something with your life. Find her. Keep your promise." I covered my mouth, tears spilling out. Malik swiped to the next image, a map of Baltimore, 12 red dots. "These are the properties I bought," Malik said. "All within 2 miles around Lincoln Elementary." I stared. All of it was for me? Because I knew if you were still in Baltimore, you'd still be somewhere nearby helping someone. Malik looked at me. That's who you are. Then Malik pulled out a blueprint and handed it to me. This is the new community center, Malik said. Look at the donor plaque. I read through my tears. Asha Delaney Center for Youth Services to honor the girl who taught me that kindness can change a life. I couldn't say a word. Malik lowered his head, his voice trembling. You didn't just feed me, Asha. You saw me. When the whole world turned away, you saw me. You treated me like I deserved to live. I sobbed. Do you know what that does to a child who believes he's worthless? Malik asked. I shook my head. I only gave you food. No. Malik stepped closer. You gave me the most important thing. He paused, like he was afraid of scaring me. I said I would marry you when I got rich, Malik said. But Asha, I don't want to marry you because I owe you. My breath caught. I want to marry you because these past few weeks, I've fallen in love with you again. Malik looked straight at me. The girl who fed me is now the most incredible woman I've ever known, still saving people. Still sacrificing, still choosing kindness. I was shaking. What did you just say? I know it's fast, Malik said, but I've loved you for 22 years. I don't want to waste one more day. I looked at him. Inside this man was still the 10-year-old boy who once went hungry until his lips turned purple. And I told the truth, one word at a time. I don't know if I love you yet, but I want to find out. Malik's face lit up like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. Really? Yeah. I nodded. We leaned toward each other, forehead to forehead. Hot tears on cold cheeks. Malik whispered, I'll spend my whole life making you happy. I whispered back, you already have. And then we kissed, gentle, unhurried, like a promise finally returned to the right person. When we pulled apart, we both laughed through tears. At last, after all these years, we had found our way back to each other. 6 months passed like a dream. The Red Ribbon Initiative supported 127 young people. The retention rate was 89%, while the average out there hovered around 40%. But I learned one thing. Numbers aren't the story. People are the story. Kendrick Vale was one of those stories. He graduated from the welding program. He got a full-time job, a salary of $42,000 a year. The day he called me, his voice cracked like a child. Ms. Asha, I never thought I'd have a future. I swallowed hard. You always had a future, Kendrick. It's just that now you have the tools to build it yourself. A few weeks later, Kendrick bought his first car. Then he sent me a Mother's Day card. On it, he wrote a line that made me sit still for a very long time. You are the only mother I've ever had. I placed that card right on my desk, so that every day I'm so tired I feel like I'm about to collapse. I only have to glance at it once to remember why I'm not allowed to quit. And during that time, Malik and I changed too. We started over like two strangers. Then we became friends. Then, something much deeper than friendship. I used to think love would arrive in grand gestures, but Malik loved me in simpler ways. His presence, his listening, and the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room, not with money, but by truly seeing me. And with each day that passed, I loved him more, peacefully, without forcing it. On the night of the 6-month anniversary, the ballroom was packed. Donors, partners, community leaders, the young people in the program, everyone was there. I stood behind the stage, slightly shaking. Malik found me and held my hand tightly. Are you okay? I breathed out. I'm just thinking about how far we've come. Malik looked at me, his eyes so warm it scared me. Scared me that I would start crying right there. Asha, he said softly. "Tonight I want you to know something. Are you ready?" "Ready for what?" Malik's smile was like a secret. 22 years ago, I promised you. It's time. My heart started pounding. "Malik, I love you," he said slowly, clearly. "I want to be with you for the rest of my life." My throat tightened. "Are you saying—" Malik leaned closer. "When I ask, what's your answer?" I started crying before I could even think, because I'd known the answer for a long time. "Yes," I whispered. "Always yes." Malik beamed. "I've had the ring with me for 3 weeks. I was just waiting for the right moment." We stepped onto the stage, hand in hand. Malik spoke about the program, about the people who had been lifted up, about the work still ahead. Then he paused and turned to look at me. "But none of this exists without one person," Malik said, his voice slowing. "Asha Delaney saved my life 22 years ago." The whole room applauded. I stood frozen, my palms ice cold. Then Malik went down on one knee. A collective gasp rose up like the entire room had just stopped breathing. He pulled out a ring, a small, delicate red ruby, matching the color of the ribbon from back then. "Asha Delaney," Malik said, his voice trembling but steady. 22 years ago, I promised I would marry you when I got rich. Will you marry me?" I cried and laughed at the same time, unable to pretend I was composed anymore. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." The room exploded. People stood and clapped. Cheers mixed with tears. Malik stood, held me, and I felt as if 22 years of distance melted right inside our breath. Our wedding was small, about 100 guests, and it took place somewhere no one expected, Lincoln Elementary School. The iron fence where I once passed Malik his very first sandwich was still there. We kept it the way you keep a reminder. A small plaque was placed beside the fence, where kindness began. Red ribbons were hung everywhere, like exclamation marks across our lives. I walked down the aisle. I no longer had a father to hold my hand. Corinne was gone too. But strangely, I didn't feel empty. I felt like she was standing somewhere in this room, smiling and nodding. Malik stood at the front, crying, then laughing. We exchanged vows. I said, "Malik, when I was 9 and you were hungry, I only did one small thing, but from that day on, I carried you in my heart. I promise I will always see you, love you, and remind you that you have always been worthy." Malik spoke, his voice thick. "Asha, you took one sandwich and turned it into a movement. You took one ribbon and turned it into a legacy. I promise I will be your partner and remind you every day that you have always been worthy too, even before I was rich." We kissed, this time as husband and wife. The reception was held at the Asha Delaney Center. Kendrick stood and raised a glass, his voice steady but his eyes red. "To the couple who taught us that family is the people who choose to love you." When everything settled, Malik and I walked back to the fence one more time. We tied a new red ribbon onto the cold metal bar. "For the next child who needs hope," Malik said. And as if life loved riding in circles, a little girl approached, 8 years old. Black, her voice small and timid. "Excuse me, my name is Sarah. I'm hungry." Malik and I looked at each other. For 1 second, my heart hurt and felt light at the same time. I knelt down to her eye level. "Come with me, Sarah. I'll get you something to eat." We brought Sarah inside, fed her, called the right support. Made sure she was safe. Sarah ate slowly, then looked up. "Why are you helping me?" I touched my locket, then looked at Malik. "Because a long time ago, someone helped him, and now it's our turn." Malik took out a red ribbon and gently tied it around Sarah's wrist. "Keep this," he said. "Remember that someone believes in you. You'll be okay, I promise." Sarah held the ribbon like she was holding something precious. When the social worker led Sarah away, I leaned into Malik. "The cycle keeps going," I whispered, "and hope does too." A few years later, the Red Ribbon Initiative was no longer a small program. It became a model that was replicated, touching hundreds and then thousands of lives, starting from something very simple: a sandwich, a ribbon, and a choice to care. Malik squeezed my hand. I looked at the hundreds of red ribbons on the fence, fluttering softly in the Baltimore wind. And inside, I heard Corinne's voice like an echo. "My little Asha, you did so well." The camera pulled back slowly. The iron fence covered in red ribbons. Each ribbon was a life redirected. Each ribbon was a promise kept. If this story touched you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. And if you've ever received a sandwich in your own life, leave a comment. Who was the person who saved you from your darkest days?